Welcome to another episode of Back to School with PC. Today's show is special. We have Yogi Maurya, the sporting director of Fateh Hyderabad, Hyderabad's original I-League football club on the show. Yogi has had a very interesting journey. He was an All-American soccer player who went to Columbia University for his undergrad and Wharton for his MBA. After spending a few years in private equity and real estate, Yogi decided to start Fateh Hyderabad in his 30s. Today's conversation with Yogi is going to be about this adventure, which brought him to the other side of the globe, Fateh Hyderabad, and the future of Indian football. It's a pleasure to have this conversation, Yogi. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start from the beginning, Yogi. Do you remember the first time you kicked a football?
I do. From when I could remember, I was 6 years old. And during the recess, during elementary school, some kids were playing and I joined in the game and I did well. And then, they asked me if I was interested in joining their traveling team, and they had practice, I think 2 days later. And, they told me, why don't you show up? And I did. And I went to the practice, and they told me what the conditions were for signing up for the traveling team called Ocean United. I was from Ocean Township, Jersey. And that was the beginning of a long and amazing journey, and also a lot of lifelong friendships that were formed through the game.
So for someone who just started off playing for fun, did you ever think of becoming a professional and taking it up as a career?
I think everybody does, but by the time I reached college, I played on my university team, Columbia University, and I was even an academic All-Ivy by my senior year. But over 4 years, you can really see the talent. And this is now, I'm talking in the mid to late 90s, 93 to 97. I could see the physical and technical gap in my ability versus the best players. And there was a big gap for sure. So to continue professionally would have been very difficult. But at least still think for my background and for the opportunities I had, I'm proud of what I was able to achieve. And more importantly, the game gave me a lot more probably than I've given it.
So that was in college when you figured that maybe you weren't cut out to become a professional?
Yeah, I think I knew before. I excelled. Obviously in high school I played for my state. I was in the Olympic development program. I played under top coaches. My high school coach, Tom Riley, was a coach of the year multiple times in New Jersey. He was an All-American in college himself in the 1980s. Late 70s. My state team coach was Bob Bradley when he was coaching Princeton University, who obviously went on to, and still now is coaching in MLS, and a great coach who had a tremendous influence, though he was young in his coaching career then. Even at Columbia, I played under a legendary coach, Dieter Ficken. So I had the opportunity to play under top coaches and compete every day in practice with great players from the Northeast. And at the time I was growing up, New Jersey was a big hotbed of soccer. The New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Long Island, there's tremendous talent at that time. So I always knew that there was something, there was a gap in what I probably could achieve on the professional level. But I was proud of what I did, given my background. Probably, I think one of the only, or for at least at the time, there's more now, I think, Indian American kids to achieve that kind of level in the sport of soccer.
Yeah. What position did you end up playing? Did you stick to one or all?
No, it's a good question. I played all over. When I started, I had more size. Ironically, I was Indian. I had a lot of the American kids, and that size was useful in different ways. And I found myself playing defense. I found myself in the midfield. I found myself, there were a number of years where I played striker, and I scored a lot of goals. Of course, when I got to college, being one of the weaker technical players, I was thrown into the defense. But towards the latter part of my college career, I gained a lot more confidence, and I was again finding myself in the midfield and in more attacking roles. And people would be surprised. They're like, where did this come from? And I think a little bit of that was just my confidence coming out. And I was able to, again, enjoy even being a little more aggressive on the offensive part of the game. But I played everywhere. Wing, midfield, central, up front, wing back, right back, left back, central back. At youth level, I even played keeper a little bit. Didn't stick to it. Probably, keeper might have been a position where I could have gone further, probably, but I didn't have the desire for the position.
Seems like you've been all around the place, but was there one position that you liked more than the others?
Different times, I really it all is about where I think as an individual player, your game develops in different ways. And at different times, you're in a different type of form. There were times where my game was very simplified and I was very good at winning the ball in the defensive midfield and playing the first pass forward. I had excelled at that and I became very adept at it. Lines with that first pass. There were times when I was so confident offensively, played really well on the wing and as a number 9. But I think centrally midfield as sort of a number 6 or number 8 is where I probably played my best football at the highest levels that I competed.
Cool. So you're here in Colombia. You've made peace with the fact that you might not even go pro and you've decided to do something else. Did you end up choosing a career path for yourself or was it something that happened to you?
Well, see, first of all, the thing about going pro, there were a lot of more talented players than me that had that knowledge that they were not going to be able to sustain a long-term professional career. So for me, on a relative basis, it was like easy to say, the fact is I don't possess the talent that even a number of great players who I'm playing with now. I was playing with a lot of national team players, guys who had worn their colors. The best of who did have a pro career, Ricky Dasson, played for Iceland and played in Norway and Greece and for Stoke City in England. He's probably the best player that I had the opportunity. All of my group had the opportunity to play with. But I played against a lot of great players too. So that was easy. It was not some kind of heartache or something. At the time, you should remember also, we had a very different system. Paid training program that has taken off now, the pay-to-play system, was only just beginning. And it was for an age bracket much younger than we were. So, the people who might blow, smoke, telling you can make it pro when you can't, there were a lot less people like that who had something to gain. So there was a lot of honesty, whether it was your own family or your peers, or your coaches. They could be totally honest with you. And I think that has changed a bit. So it was easier then to sort of come to that realization. I think it's hard for players who were on that borderline, because I have some teammates I played with, they were on the border of being possibly able to make it through, and if they were a little inconsistent at that level and their professional breakthrough never really happened at the highest level. They stayed sort of at the lower level. So I think they may have a little bit of regret in the sense that the opportunities weren't there at the time, neither at the youth stage or at the pro stage. To your next question, you asked about career. I didn't really follow any particular path. I took courses I was interested in college. I was very interested in economics and political science, and I took courses on that, not knowing where I would end up or what I would end up doing. But I did have an inner voice that always told me I'd be a coach. My college teammate and roommate, Dennis Bond, who's the head coach at Lafayette University now for, I think it's nearly 20 years. He always used to bug me about it. He said, I know you're going to coach. He went straight into it. He knew his path right away, and he paid his dues. I took the more circuitous path, but he would always tell me, even 10, 15 years after college, you want to coach. So I think that was inevitable.
Just talking about those 10 years that you ended up having a corporate career, you did go back to school again and you went to Wharton, right? And you did have a stint within private equity. How was that for you?
I spent, if you look at when I actually stopped working, it was 2014. So 17 years I worked, within 10, 12 years in private equity, construction, real estate. Yeah, it was a great experience. I think that the transition for me to coaching has been easier for me given my background. Having an earlier career in its own way contributes to who you are. Leadership, communication skills, ability to be analytical and find ways to complexity down into simplicity, having the ability to see a big picture and a small picture, the ability to understand the business side of things, all of that has contributed, I think, to a transition that is a lot easier for me having done it later. It doesn't mean that the other way couldn't have worked out. I also think I needed that time in the corporate world for myself to really understand what my ultimate passions were. And I've also discovered that sometimes you have passions keep continuing to develop. Football's not just everything for me. As much as I love it and I love coaching, I still enjoy investing. I enjoy the financial markets. I enjoy real estate. and a host of other things. So it's also made me well-rounded, I think, as an individual.
You spent about 12 years within the whole private equity real estate space, and you ended up coming back to something that you really loved, which is football. How was the transition like? Was it like immediate that you got up one fine day and you knew that you wanted to do this, or you knew that you wanted to do this, so you built up to that point?
Well, the first thing I want to say, I mean, I love the private equity industry. You shouldn't mistake it that I'm one of these people that hated my job or my life. I absolutely love the private equity industry. I've gotten to work with really smart people, both people senior to me and people at my level, people below me. The industry attracts really bright people who have a lot to offer, personally and professionally. And I learned a lot about different businesses and investing. So what burned me out was, maybe the corporate rat race part of it burned me out. But the industry in general, it's a great, great place to be. And I highly recommend it. The transition to your question, it was in two parts. There was the part where I started coaching while I was working, and I started studying to coach. And, that was probably the better part of 4 years where I coached and I worked. And I didn't quit my day job because it was just simply not feasible. And I wanted to just get a taste and understand. And then finally, I kind of got to a point where in 2014, a lot of changes happened for me personally. My father had passed away. I just reached a different point in the stage of my life where I thought, I'm okay to take a break from what I'm doing and try this full time and see where it leads. And that was sort of the second phase. But to your question, no, it was not easy. I had to coach for free. I had to study. At the time, AFC had a rule: if you're over 36, you can't do the D license. So I had to get licensed. I had to first go abroad to England. I did an international license, and then luckily, I did well enough that AIFF, Scott O'Donnell at the time, who was running coaching, said, I'll put you in the B in AFC. So I was able to skip D and C and get my B. That took time. It took patience. Then I started with a small 20-meter by 15-meter patch of grass at a polo horse riding club. It was owned by close friends of mine. And I had like 5 kids. And this was 2014. Football was active in the city, but I had to learn my craft and be very humble. And slowly, though, opportunities started to open up as I was able to prove my ability and have a vision. And that led to Fateh Hyderabad.
That sounds like a pretty ardent journey, but I guess everyone has to put in the yards before you get to where you are. Moving towards Fateh Hyderabad, how did a football club in Hyderabad happen?
I founded the club. I started it. And it was simple. I thought at the time I was running a soccer academy, and how could I have a bigger impact in the community and have a bigger impact developing players? And the idea that came to my mind was to start a football club. Fortunately, the vision was big enough that the AIFF supported the idea of playing in second division. The local Telangana Football Association was looking for, at that time, they didn't have as many suitors as they do now. So I came at a time when I was willing to invest where no one else was, really. And that gave me some leverage to get the club and get into the A division of their local league. And we did a lot. We played the Youth I League. We played the second division. We've supported the Baby League in Hyderabad. So we've done coaching licenses. We've helped a tremendous number of players and coaches. And I think we've made a pretty big impact. And I think our willingness has sort of opened the way and shown others who are now investing. And I think that's a great sign that the Hyderabad football scene is growing. I really think we deserve some credit for that.
You deserve more than enough credit for that. And going back to the day that you started Fateh Hyderabad, you had to put a team on the pitch, right? And you're playing second.
Yeah.
So how was that like? Like, did you go scouting by yourself, or like, how was the whole journey?
Good question. No, it's a mix of everything. You use your personal network of contacts, you use professional contacts, and I think the first thing I was dead set on was that I was not going to invest a lot of money in player wages because not out of a fear, but just out of a practical realization that I didn't have the experience. I didn't know what second division was or Indian football at that level as a coach was. I'd seen a lot of games and spoken to a lot of people, and but to really be willing to take that kind of risk, I wasn't. So I thought, okay, we're going to get a bunch of young kids. We're going to learn a lot. Hopefully we won't get killed on the field. And then we'll take that knowledge and we'll see how this whole system works. And that's what I did, and we didn't get killed. We finished last the first year, only 2 games that had a little bit of a lopsided scoreline, 4-0 and a 3-0. But the team that I think finished first or second, Naroka finished, we tied and drew with them. We Mohammedan, we lost 2-1 in 2 games back to back, and played really competitive games against a team from Sikkim at the time. So even though I put in a young team that didn't really cost much, we competed. It taught me a lot that you don't necessarily have to spend a lot. But, it also gave me the confidence. So then by the second season, I was willing to invest in more experienced players because I thought I knew what I was getting for that value. And we followed up our second year with a top 4 finish. And, our third year, the format changed again, and we just missed qualifying by 2 points and played some great football. Again, had players selected into the ISL, and our third year. Now, our fourth year, again, we missed qualifying by 1 game. We had to win 1 game, and didn't work out. We lost to a better team, Ozone, that year. I'll concede that for sure. But again, been a great experience for me.
Thinking of the first season that you put the team on, I'm assuming you were the sporting director and your work was not just about putting players on the pitch. It was also outside of the football team as well. So how was the other side of things, like the commercial side of things for you?
Yeah, it's a real learning experience. I've learned from the ground up. It's like any business in the sense that there's, in football, most football, professional football at least, the L has tended to be bigger than the P. I think over the last 5 years, the experience I've gained in every facet of where I think we have a lot of inefficiency from youth development all the way to the professional level. What I've tried to do is use my experience as a corporate professional to really understand how these inefficiencies drive suboptimal outcomes when it comes to use of time and capital. And so you'd be surprised with the way things are traditionally done in a lot of places that don't make sense because they're driving these suboptimal outcomes. And if you're willing to change your thinking and put a little bit more analytical rigor in, I found you can't change the whole system because we're not in control of it. But you can certainly take decisions that lead to better outcomes given the risk and protect your downside risk a lot more. And I don't just mean how you use the capital. I also mean how you spend your time. And it's taken time for me to adapt and understand and build that philosophy and that model. And I've basically been keeping sort of a series of logbooks that have got a lot of notes and then leading to basically a concrete handbook. I'm going to do things in every area of the club based on my experience. And some of the stuff is a little bit, it's out of the box. It would be a little radical, but what I've concluded is if you keep doing things the same way, as it's always said, you're going to get the same outcomes. So in the beginning, people are going to say probably a little crazy, which happens. But even now, if you're trying to change an outcome and the traditional linear model isn't really available to you and it's complicated by the inefficiencies in the system, you've got to think a lot more creatively if your goal is to do things, be competitive, develop players, and be sustainable.
Fair. Just going back to that whole idea of upskilling itself. So you decided to start a football club and did get in a lot of experience from the commercial side of things. But when it comes to the coaching aspect, you decided to go get your batches. And that's something very, very different for owners to do, right?
Sure. I mean, it's just how you position it. Again, this is what I mean. People are going to say, why are you coaching? You're an owner. you could look at it the other way. I could have started as a coach and got an ownership share and become a partner. And then someone would say, well, it's just an incentive that coach has been given. Pat Riley went to Miami as their, equivalent of a sporting director, and he was given shares. It's not like, and Pat went down and coached the team, and he had an ownership stake. He was a partner. They coached the team in 2006 when they won the title. So, it's just about how you think and your perception. Now, being willing to do that for me, okay, and my choice, I did make that choice. For me, it has helped me, I think, become far better at the job I'm doing in the way I have to do it in my context, which is I have to have an eye on sustainability and I have to be capable of understanding risk constantly. So to do that and to be on the ground operating as a coach, there's very little that I would say there's nothing that happens inside the club that I don't understand intimately well, including the relationship management that happens between the different stakeholders in the club. So it's been great for me that way. I feel coaching and teaching is also a great mirror. It's a tremendously challenging profession, and I feel challenged, and I feel like I've grown a lot by making that choice. If I just stayed in the owner role, it's not that I don't think I would have learned a lot and done well, but I don't think I would have got out of my comfort zone. And now I think I sort of have both sides of the experience I want. And I'm more comfortable going into just the owner role today than earlier because I just have more understanding of the on the pitch part, which I feel is at the heart of everything that has to happen at the club. So,
thinking of that time that you started coaching and you had like 5 kids, how was it? Did you regret the decision?
I didn't. No, of course. I didn't. There are people around me saying, what the hell are you doing? There's 5 kids here and you're worth so much more than this. What essentially was people were implying to me. But I wasn't looking at the near term. I had an end point in mind. I had a vision in mind. I'm still on that journey. But you have to be willing to ignore a lot of that noise and make your peace with it. I didn't take that decision the first day I started coaching, right? I told you I didn't quit my day job. I volunteered. I paid my dues. And I got to that point fully knowing that I have to be willing to absorb a period of time where it could be difficult. And there could be more times down the road, like now with this COVID thing and the way second division is, there's challenges. But I think the sooner you're able to, how can I say, kind of be practical and analyze the situation, but then make your peace with it, whichever direction it is, whether you want to give in to what is uncomfortable and go back to a more comfortable situation, or you feel, okay, you know what, I'm going to keep seeing where this leads me, or maybe you have a steadfast belief and commitment. I don't care what the current near-term situation is telling me. I'm completely committed and I believe. That also may be your mentality. So I'm comfortable. When you leave, I think what you're getting at is, this traditional pathway that a lot of, and I could say successful, well-educated Indian youth go at, right? We're very good in the academics and often attracted to technical careers and professions. I think what you're getting at is that comfort factor versus the alternative paths. And if I share what has worked for me, number one, just save, and invest. When you work in the corporate route and you're doing those jobs, but if that's your case and you need to make a living, like I did, I was an absolute miser in most of my decisions. Okay, and I looked at it like every dollar or rupee I can save and put into the stock market to work for me, the better chance I have of freedom later on for what I want to do. Live minimalistic and save for your dream. You may not even know what your dream is, but if the first thing is you want freedom, you're going to need financial freedom. And if you're not from a situation where freedom can come to you easily and you need to create it, save. And then the decision becomes easier. The second thing I'd say, you get used to managing in a smaller budget. It just happens. If you talk to people who go the entrepreneurial pathway and there's a period of bootstrapping, you just get smarter and you get used to it and you stop worrying about the lack of that check being credited every 2 weeks or every month or whatever it is, it stops becoming a real big issue if you've done it smartly. So I think that helps deal with that. And then the third thing is today I think take these risks because employers even, they're not just hiring based on, this is, I know INSEAD, Wharton, Columbia, they're not just hiring based on where you went to school anymore. They're choosing people based on their own individual experience and what they feel the capability might be of that person and their ability to fit in. So I think you can always go back to a corporate environment if you feel you've given a certain amount of time, it doesn't work out. And today, there's lots of ways to make a living while you pursue your opportunity. So I would encourage the risk-taking. I don't think the risks are as great as maybe our own mind tells us they are. And it also depends what kind of person you are, I have a lot of friends who are in the traditional career route, and they're doing fantastic, and they love their job. If you really love your job, keep going. And, I think for me, personally, I really wanted freedom and control over my own time. That was worth more to me than the safety of the job. Then have the intangible piece, which is just self-belief. The biggest thing is if you don't pursue something that's burning inside here, you will have regret, and that's the worst piece. I don't have any regret. I thought I would coach at an academy level. I've coached the pro team and did pretty well, and I've gotten that experience in my life. I still want to do more.
Fair. I wanted to tell you about this one story that I had. This was maybe in 2015-16 when I was working in Singapore, and I met this US Marine who was a friend's friend. He was stationed in Guam. I just heard of Guam in the news because India had lost to Guam 2-1, I guess, in one of these qualifiers. And then I had this conversation with him wherein he was like, Guam's about 150,000 people and India has about 1 billion and maybe half. He was puzzled in terms of why we weren't able to beat a team like Guam. So what is it that we are lacking as a footballing country?
Well, to just look at that headline I guess it sells news, but it's not how the game works. If you look at Guam, they had a number of players who were, it's a U.S. territory. And a lot of U.S.-born players who play in MLS are eligible to play for Guam. Maybe not good enough to crack the U.S. national team. So on the recruitment side, I think it was Gary White who was coaching Guam at the time. He brought in a lot of those players. And those players are arguably better than a number of our players in the Indian national team. So country to country is not, first of all, what you see. You've seen a lot of for example, a lot of French-born players who are of African descent playing for African teams, but they're French-born and developed in the French system. But those teams are qualifying for the World Cup and doing well. So you can't let I call that noise distract what's actually the issue. Look, we're a new country when it comes to modern football. It's just a reality. It's an immature sport here. It's growing. It's certainly growing in its popularity. But it's like cricket. Cricket took a long time before India was a dominant force. Today, we have probably could put 5 national teams out that'll win games against other great cricketing nations, right? We have that kind of talent, depth. So with a place like India, had this conversation recently. The size, first of all, doesn't really matter. And when you start looking at micro communities, whether it's a country like Iceland or it's Catalonia or whatever region that has small populations that do well, Holland, Belgium, etc., that do well in football, that's one part. Where the size could help us is participation increases at youth level. Naturally, you have more numbers to pick from, and then it's about the amount of play. So hopefully that'll grow, and over the next decade, we can see better young talents coming up.
What is it that you think could definitely help accelerate this process of us becoming a much better footballing nation?
I'm a big believer that it's all about the culture. The more kids that are playing every day all over this country, it's just natural that you have more to pick from. And I think that will lead to some kind of quantum leap being taken. I personally don't think that we have the resources to approach this with throwing a lot of money at it and the structured linear path is what our strength is. That adds a lot of value, certainly, but it restricts participation because you're increasing the cost. We know that you don't have to do that to produce great footballers. We know that. Where I think we have the strength is just like in cricket. If you go out to the Maidans of this country every morning and evening, there's probably millions of kids who play informal cricket. And you have that in football in certain hotbeds. Certainly the Northeast is often spoken of, West Bengal, Kerala, maybe even Punjab now, but it's happening a little more, but not enough. You need more and more of that in bigger numbers. I think that'll accelerate more than all of the other initiatives that we have that are great, but there's enough data to support the idea that taking a kid when they're 5 years old and sticking them in an academy system isn't what the problem is.
We could finish off on this note. Like, there are a lot of us who are fans, and how do you think a fan could be more involved in the game?
First of all, fans are really knowledgeable today. I see some people in football are dismissive of fans, but I think that's a little bit of hubris because these days with the transparency and the amount of video that's available, and fans are really knowledgeable about the game, so they have a lot to offer. And I think one thing that fans do and should continue doing is offering their view. That's what football's about. It makes it a great sport to debate. There are subjective aspects to this sport still. I think that's great, and I think fans just continue supporting their local team. Probably one of the best things if you're looking at Indian football is to support local football and local football growing in terms of participation, because that will have the biggest impact on talent development. And if you're of the mindset and the perception that only a structured academy from the youngest age, race to the bottom, Tiger Woods style, is going to make Indian footballers, I respectfully would disagree that that's the best approach for a country like India for a number of reasons. So go out, contribute, coach, organize games. Don't just be a fan. Get involved. You don't need a license to coach kids, in my opinion. There's a lot of great material, even online. You can talk to people. You don't have to be a great tactician. In fact, that can be a drawback for working with youth. Get involved as a coach, parent, organizer, volunteer, organize tournaments. There's so many ways to get involved in more than just consuming the game on TV or going to the game at the stadium. So I would encourage that and not be afraid of it,
And I guess on this note, we could end today's podcast with the message that just be involved in any capacity that you can to promote the game. And it was a nice conversation, Yogi.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on, Prakash. I really appreciate it. It is my pleasure. And I hope people got something out of it. Really grateful that people are interested in what my story is and what our club is doing. So thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a ton, Yogi, again.
Thank you. Cheers, Prakash.